Welcome back to Horrifically Well Read, Blood and Said. Today we are so honored to be joined by Agatha Andrews, the host of the excellent podcast She Wore Black. Welcome, Agatha.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
What's it like to be on the other end?
I've been on the other end before with some other folks, so
Yeah,
it's just fun. I'm looking forward to not editing a show I'm on.
Isn't that
right?
nice? Yes. Well, we just
See
we're
if a wide shot here.
Hello.
like fans of what you do and just, try to make sure that everyone within the entire horror ecosystem is represented of people that we feel do an awesome job of showing that to the rest of the community. So I wanted to make sure that, we invited you on because you have your own unique style where you stick to certain like maybe I would say 80% of certain, but then you will also try on a few other genres. And I think it's fun the way you mix it up and kind of I personally find that only sticking within horror, it's like who exactly labeled that? Which is exactly where I'm like, I didn't think I was a horror reader because I was reading horrific things. So I really like that you'll touch into other places because those elements can be brought in. It's just not sometimes labeled as that. But we would love to hear kind of how you got started into your podcast.
Okay. Well, many, many moons ago, pre-YouTube, I had a book show. I was a librarian, and then I had a book show, that was local public access, but I was still interviewing Susanna Clark and Reza Aslan and Melissa Bank and a lot of people because I had been a bookseller in Austin for a long time and was able to make connections with folks that I would help me with interviews because this was all, again, all pre-YouTube. The internet was just kind of in its early hilarious days. So I mean, and I'd been writing about books and such for a long time. I've been in the atmosphere and in the world for a long time. So it's been like, gosh, closing in on 30 years that I've either been, working with books or interviewing authors. So that was many moons ago. Gosh, very, very like early 2004 through 7, maybe.
So,
And then
like, they
I
counted
kept
you like it's Wayne's World style, the thing really
Yeah,
good.
Yes.
yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely, but I got to have the marvelous Susanna Clark,
Yeah,
like, things like this on my show, so that was really great, and then, I just kept being a librarian, and we moved back up to the Austin area after being gone for a little bit, and I needed to stay home with my kid, which I missed the library work. I missed connecting people to books. And so it was just, I started writing again. So I got a lot of nonfiction articles out, and it was always about books, always about reading. And then I just, I really, there's another thing that who's Gen X in this room, listener? And if you were Gen X, you might remember a show called Pump Up the Volume. That was an early influence, honestly.
yes.
Podcasts didn't exist, but you could do pirate radio. And
Mhm.
my friends and I in college used to always sort of dream about having a pirate radio show. And what would we talk about? And back then, it was very political. We were very politically oriented. And then we also wanted like edgy music too. But so this was just sort of a way to kind of put all of the things like my old show, the whole pump up the volume dream, and then just I really missed connecting people to books. And so it was just kind of doing that again. I had a previous podcast that I really enjoyed on Texas history, and it was like spooky Texas history. But I have put that aside because there's just, COVID happened. I was home with my kid. Doing the research was not as accessible because things weren't open. We could go to cemeteries, but we couldn't go to the archives and look things up, things like this. So I just kind of went back to what I knew, which was my whole career, was a librarian. So it was just sort of going back to that work that I always loved. I've always been spooky, so spooky made sense. And kind of on the thing that you were talking about with occasionally incorporating things other than horror or gothic, I really want to give a lot of credit on that to a podcast that is an OG podcast. She's been doing this from the beginning of podcasts, which is Smart Bitches Trashy Books. I've had Sarah Wendell on my show before a number of times. I've been on her show a number of times. She's a wonderful podcasting citizen, but she's a romance podcaster who will, like me, have things outside of the romance genre sometimes. So she might have nonfiction, she might have someone who writes Gothic or science fiction or something else on there, but it's still someone that would appeal to her listeners. And I kind of really felt like that gave me permission to lean into who I am and what I like. And her motto, her mantra, and this is really what inspired me to kind of just dig my heels in and do whatever I want on my show, which is who's going to stop me? That's Sarah's mantra, and now it's mine.
I
I
love that. That's awesome. Well, you have a really deep and complex layered history with just when you hear your show, you can tell how smart and diversified you are with just knowing the depth that you come from, right? But when you said like you had missed, recommending a book, I wanted to just what's that feeling for you? Whether it's now over your show or as a librarian, what does that do for you personally to like connect a book to someone?
Well, it's meaningful because books are with you forever. And so, in order to be a school librarian in the state of Texas, I was a public librarian for a while too, but you have to have been a teacher first.
You, I did not know that.
You have to have been a teacher for 2 years before you can even apply for the master's that is required to become a school librarian. And so, you go to graduate school twice, basically, if you're a secondary person. And that's fine because what you what you care about as a teacher is connecting people to information, right? And that's ultimately what, giving people the tools to, and in this case, it would be students. But when you're a public librarian, it's any patron of any age. But basically, it's giving people information, access to information so that they can use it in whatever way they want that behooves them, right? And so for me, everything I've ever done with my career has not, I don't want to say altruistic, but it has always had an intended purpose of what's the mark I can make on this world? We all live together, we all have an obligation to make the world a better place. What are the things that I know? What are the things that I can do that does that? And so if I'm connecting people to books, it is a contribution that is information, it's literacy, it's curiosity, books make us better people. So this is a way that I can continue that work. And it's just always been something I've done. My mom had me volunteering very young. We always had political campaigns and stuff coming out of our house. I have always been doing the work since I was a child. I don't know anything else. And
An
so there you
amazing
go.
childhood to have that representation given to you so early. My best friend is like that. Her mom has always had her doing things in the county parks and volunteering. And even now, it's like she's always volunteering for lots of things. And it's just normal for her to just be. It's an aspect of myself that is not as developed as it should be. And I love seeing how natural that comes to her. So, but I think it was that she was shown early how to do it and to just really be fearless about it. It's not there's no, like, nervousness or uncomfortable or what do I do? And
Well,
yeah, that
so you're building a platform, right? And she has her own platform, and I have my own platform. And so, what are you going to do with it, right? And so, one of the things that I did as a librarian, for example, that I like to try to do here, and you and I have talked about this separately, is not just representation so that you have clout. But for me, as a brown person from South Texas, it is important. And this is why my mother raised me the way she did, and my father too, is that what can we do? So when I was a librarian, for example, in South Texas, I was a librarian in Austin too, but in South Texas, I was like, well, okay, my hometown is 350,000 people, but it's also consistently rated one of the least literate cities in the nation. What can I do to change that? And then, what are the impacts on people that look like me? Because I know what I always thought was not available to me. So with my show, I almost always feature women. I often have a ethnically diverse, but I just put whatever I want out there. Like, I don't like men to get in their feelings about me saying, "Well, that doesn't really fit the show." But there are things that are not going to fit my show. I know who my audience is, and my audience are people that crave, things that are kind of gothic or swoony or, things that center people. I mean, when you look at my demographics, often, it's 89 to 91% female, and, you know, and they're usually between millennials and, like, 65 years of age. And so there's like an age demographic, there's a gender demographic, or queer demographic that are interested in what I have. And so that's who my audience is. But there's definitely podcasters out there that also have horror that don't have that. They are very male centric, for example, and that's their platform, that's their audience, that's who they serve. It's just what you bring to the table.
I feel like I've said to Adam before, I almost want to catch, not exclusively, but I almost want to catch these indie authors or young authors early, almost like we're the elementary school teachers and saying, "You're amazing," or junior high, right? Or whatever it is, high school, whatever is helping you to, before you have that full breakout. Because
Mhm.
sometimes it's so easy to just follow the trends or to just say, "Oh, what's hot, what you're reading." And there is such talent out there. And I want to be able to give these people that have so much amazing just work out there that wouldn't ordinarily be showcased maybe,
Yeah.
or, and so I think, like, the indie part is where it started for us the most, of like,
Mhm.
wow, there's really good work being done out here, but because they're not trad published, it was like, how do we promote that more?
Well, that's a whole other conversation though, because what happens too is that people, I don't want to say abuse you, but people put a weird pressure on you to like, you're here to serve me. And it's no, it's a two-way street, because I also invest my time for free. This is me doing the work for free. One of the things
What
that
you're saying is,
is
like, you
It's
taking advantage of that, your petition, and we are
right.
getting a lot more now, but Adam's very,
Well, I can
I'm
go back.
I'm always like the bleeding heart where I'm like, "Yeah, I would love to showcase you." Adam's like, "No, we need to actually look at
yeah.
their work, and we need to read
Does
it.
that fit who we
Does
are?
that fit,
Yeah.
and are we genuine?" And we've had the practice for a while that always one of us reads, who's on. It might not be both. Sometimes it's both of us that have read it, but it's not always that way. But just, I feel like
Well,
I'll
so that's actually really important, and that's where I was going, and with what I was saying is, like, I also started my podcast in the wake of a small publishing disaster because I was assigned author with a small press, and they blew up in a racist ball of flames, like, overnight. In 24 hours, they were gone, and it was like, "Okay, well, what do I do now?" And then, like, a couple of weeks later, I saw another small press do that, and this just kinda kept happening, and this has happened a million times over since I started my show. Now, that's not to say that small presses are bad, but you do run a risk whenever you're working with someone that is like one or two people behind the helm. And there are people that are really great at it. But there are also people that just this is a consistent issue. And so, when I'm working with publicists at Berkeley, they know my taste. They know exactly what I like, and so that's what they send me, and I do wanna read the books before. And with indie, it's, like, hard, like, everybody is desperate to be platformed, and I totally understand that. I think about being indie quite a lot, like, well, there's this book I wanna do or this project I wanna work on, and probably the easiest or best way to do it before like, because the trad publishing system takes forever.
Years. Yeah.
And so if I wanna do it before then, I need to do it indie. Like, I've been through every part of this rodeo. It's not like it's not like I don't understand, but you do need, one of the things in my earlier days as a podcaster I ran across was platforming books that I ultimately didn't like because I had made the obligation because people in the quote unquote community were like, "Okay, well, let me be your friend so that I can guilt you into having my book," or whatever.
Right.
Or, everybody's like, "Well, this is the hot book." And then when I ultimately try to read it, it's very much not my taste. Not that there's anything wrong with the book. The book might be great, but
right
it may not be
something
my
that,
show because a show is like a publisher. There's styles, there's things
right,
that appeal to you. And so what people don't really understand is that we are tailoring are showed to a particular, not just aesthetic, but a taste. It's a curation.
Mhm.
And if you're not honoring that, you're not honoring your listeners either. And yes, you might open them up to something new, but there is still always connective threads. If I decide, okay, well, I'll have a cozy fantasy, there's going to be a connective thread to the books that I usually have on there that are more Gothic to that cozy fantasy. It's not a random choice.
I genuinely feel like so far, because Adam has been so stringent about it, that we've been really careful.
Yeah.
And I can only think of one person that I like, one author that I've invited in. It didn't end up working out, but I read and I was like, I didn't really love it. And so I didn't end up having to, we didn't end up putting it out anyway. But other than that, I mean, I feel like we've done everything. I When I recommend something, I want it to be like, I actually really enjoyed the hell out of this.
Yeah, I think twofold, like, it's a really interesting point that you make, and I think it is really important understanding that, like, to do something like we're doing is not just a, "Oh, will you come on? Yes, okay," and then you do it, right? It is more about, like, "Okay, who am I inviting on and why?" And if I don't have an answer to that, then I need to look at why I want that person on the show in the first place, or the opposite, why are they asking to come on my show if I look at, like, their book or read the book and I'm like, "This really isn't
This
what we
isn't what we
do,"
do.
kinda
Right,
thing,
and
and
that
say
happens
that
with publishing, people
yeah,
will submit things to magazines or
mhm,
to publishing houses that in no way, shape, or form it's like you're not gonna submit a slasher to Bramble, you
right,
know,
yeah,
and you're not gonna submit a romance to Nightfire, but
right,
people do it all the time.
because 'cause they're just
So
throwing all out there.
right, and our podcasts are just like that because everybody, is doing their absolute best in this world, and they're just trying to get eyes and ears on their books, and I understand, but it's the thing is that your book will best be served in the right home,
Mhm,
and my show may not be the right home for you, because the
yeah,
truth is that trad published authors don't get massive amounts of attention all the time either, like, they're all hustling too because trad
Yeah.
pub doesn't do all the things that it once did. As far
yeah,
as, like, helping with marketing, you do a lot of your own marketing anymore, and there are great publicists that, really do their best to get their stuff out there, but there's limited resources, and, you know, there's books I still learn about all the time that have been out a couple of years, and I've never heard of them, and that's just the way it is, and they're trad pubbed. But, and
yeah.
I'm aware, I mean, I read all the journals, I do all the things, and it's just it's rough out there, and we're all just doing our best.
Yeah, so well, I wanna ask, like, how do you approach then one, do you look at your show like, when I think about, like, seasons or years, like, how do you get yourself ready and start thinking about what that schedule is gonna be? Like, do you look at the books that are sent to you, read them, and say, like, "Oh, I definitely want this?" Is there, like you look at the authors coming out with books and say, "I've talked to them before, I definitely want them back?" Like, how do you approach, like,
All kinds of
filling that
ways.
out?
I mean,
Yeah.
just like when I was a librarian, I looked at multiple resources before I made a purchase. So
Mhm,
with this, I mean, there are times where I reach out to an author. If I see something really interesting on Instagram or something, I
mhm,
might then reach out to the author and go, "This looks amazing. Can I have an arc or whatever to, or who's your publicist that I can talk to at your publishing house about, to get like a media kit or whatever." So I might reach out to an author, but like I said, I mean, publicists, even in small presses, will reach out to me. I mean, I get contacted all the time from small presses that may have one or two people working there, but as long as they know my taste, they know what appeals to me. Like
yeah,
Tenebris Press could send me something every single time they have something out, but they know what I like. And
mhm,
so they'll reach out to me when they know, oh, this will fit Agatha's taste.
yeah,
And I may still not take it just based on my schedule, but if my schedule's open and I think it's interesting, then I'll go for it. But yeah, at this point of my show, I work either with publishers or I reach out to the authors directly. I don't do that much with unsolicited stuff just because, again, I have a limited amount of time. There's 52 weeks a year, and I don't do anything in the summer. I do a couple of shows because my kid's home. And so, I have very, like, what does that leave me? 40 weeks a year that I might do a show. And right now, because I'm on my own writing deadline, it's even more reduced. And so, at this point, I'm fulfilling some obligations to some friends that whose books I was interested in a long time ago. and a couple of things that have been sent to me from different publishers that I've agreed to, because the thing is I agree, like, okay, here sent me things about 10 different books. This one looks interesting. Send me more information about this. And then that's how I pick. The thing is like there's so many more wonderful books than I have time. I don't have time to
It is
cover. There's
it is
so
like
many
the
wonderful.
biggest.
Embarrassment of riches
I
that it's like,
know, I know. But
But
it's
like, how? The thing is like I could just there was a podcaster once upon a time, and I know others have done it too, that is no longer podcasting for other reasons, but, he clearly wasn't reading the material, and it
oh,
showed, and people
yeah,
started getting really insulted, and I understand. So when you come on my show, you know that I've read your book, and you know that I've invested questions that are thoughtful, and I do my best to try to make it worth your time. And again, all of it's for free, guys. So don't
mm,
like, we
yeah,
don't, yeah, you give what you can, as far as of your time and of yourself. But it's really important to me that I don't just throw any and everyone up just because, oh, it would be great to have that person on because they're getting attention, or it would be in my best interest to have this person on. I could do that, but why? That's
yeah,
not ultimately my interest of connecting readers to books is deeper than me just trying to be fancy. Like, I wanna actually have people connect to books, not just like, "Look at me, I've talked to this person," you know?
right, definitely. I wanna transition into talking more about, like, some of the books and the things that you do talk about on your show, and I think it's really interesting to talk at this time with you right now, the state
Okay.
of especially the country that we're in,
Yes.
and why I think it lends itself to the Gothic so much right now, and we're seeing sort of, and it's interesting because I think we're seeing a revival of the aesthetic of Gothic a lot,
For
where
sure.
things are calling themselves Gothic that really might not necessarily be. But then also, like, the traditional Gothic, I love how it is very much about sort of that play of authority and the people in power kind of thing, and, the character being someone that either is trapped under it or fighting it in some way, and how much that kind of reflects. I know we agree on a lot of on things, and how much that is important, and really the sort of, like, exposing the sort of a lot of times villainous underbelly of that traditional sort of power that's going on, so just, like, tell me all of your thoughts on that.
Well, aren't we living in one big haunted house right now?
Oh my god.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if what you're looking for is, like, the connection of Gothic or why Gothic is resonating in these times, but
Mhm. Let's start there, yeah.
one of the things about Gothic is the slow buildup of dread, right? Which we have certainly been feeling
Yep.
over the last decade. I mean, I feel like we've had 10 years robbed of our lives. And the truth is that it's been going on longer than that, right?
Mhm.
Right.
But it's the slow build of dread. And then with Gothic right now, one of the things that has been interesting is whether or not those Gothic stories have a happy ending. Quite a few of the famous ones have not.
Yeah.
And so, that's not uplifting, and
Mhm.
sometimes that's what you want. So people are kind of reaching for 2 different things, I think, right now, which is, like, either Bridgerton or cozy fantasy or that kind of vibe, or they're reaching, really digging their heels into navigating horror and navigating Gothic, and, I don't really know what to say about that beyond the fact that the slow buildup of dread, the question of madness, the thing is that we're not dealing with Byronic heroes, we're dealing with maniacs in charge,
Mm.
and there's a space for that in Gothic, right? For sure. And so at this point, the interest in Gothic romance has been interesting because at least there you have the happy ending. And it's not easy to get there. It's never an easy road to get there. And it may be ugly and gruesome and gory, even in a Gothic romance, but you will get there. If you persevere, you will get there. I'm not sure what to say, honestly. I wish I had the answer on our interest in it when it doesn't have a happy ending because I feel like right now our mental health really needs some bit of hope. So, I just think that there's a reflection on how we feel, like we're in one big haunted house.
Yeah. It's funny because the slow build of dread and, being in the big haunted house absolutely, like, reverberated in my soul when you said it. Um,
I
and
was like,
yeah,
there's the clip.
yeah, but it's like, I think that there's this sort of feeling that, like, it's this odd thing of going about your day-to-day existence and still having to do those things while there's this, like, seeping cloud, like, this just storm cloud over everything. And, I feel like, the Gothic does that so well, right? You think of, like, Jane Eyre and different things where it's like she's teaching these kids and she's being a governess, and it's like at the whole time you're like, "Something's not right, something," and it's like, I feel like that sort of has sort of gone into all of our lives, at least the people that have empathy and care about anyone that's around them, like that feeling, right?
Well, Jane Eyre's a survival story. It's a survival story. Are we Mary Cats or are we, her sister in We've Always Lived in the Castle?
Yeah.
Which role are you gonna take? Where Mary Cat's like, "Well, I'm gonna try to take charge, and here's what I'm gonna do," and sometimes it's going to be murderous, and other times it's going to be witchy, and, as far as, like, just when you have trying to have a sense of control when you don't have any. um, or to cling to what little control you do have, and that's what Jane Eyre does, as you were saying, and that's a survival story, and that's what We've Always Lived in the Castle does, that's what the Hacienda does, that's all of those things. Rebecca, which Hacienda is in conversation with, is another survival story, and that I wouldn't necessarily call it a happy ending, except for the fact that she survives, but it's not a love story, and so neither is Wuthering Heights, by the way. I'll be talking about that soon, and,
Yes, I saw, I'm excited for that for sure.
yeah, I hope yeah, I'm excited for it too. I'm not sure what to make of the movie, but I'm sure gonna see it.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
yeah, wondering whether it's all vibes or if it's actually gonna get to
Oh, it's
some of the
vibes.
meatier things, yeah. I mean, it's gonna be beautiful, like, you know that at least, right?
Yeah, it's vibes, yeah, with 30 somethings playing it's gonna be like Grease, they're in their 30s, but they're playing 18-year-olds. Sure,
Love it. Absolutely love
sure.
it.
Well, I saw the one thing talking to the director, and she said, in the poster and in the trailer, Wuthering Heights is in quotes
Yeah,
because it's really not the book,
it's fanfic.
kind of thing. Yeah, which I'm like, "Okay, at least you're recognizing that, right?" So, that there's something to that, I guess.
She coulda just made her own movie, but whatever, let her fanfic herself up if she
You
wants.
know? Yeah, exactly. Oh, so well, I wanted to, talk about we had said Gothic has been around for so long, right? And it's gone through so many different forms. And I love the sort of, we just had Aaron Crosby Eckstein on talking about Junie. I don't know if you've read that yet, but it's, Southern Gothic using, antebellum South right before the Civil War and sort of some of these things that are so American and taking it to this like very, Gothic at its heart was English, European, that kind of thing, all of the things I had to do that. And I think about Junie, I think about like this cursed house and how it lends to that American lens of the things that are specific to this country. And just wanted to get your thoughts on like the American Gothic and what that actually means because we have the painting that's called that, that's really not Gothic, right? But then we have like these things like how do you see this country lending itself to traditional real Gothic themes?
Well, America is when you think American Gothic, I mean, for me, that means a lot of different things because this country is geographically huge.
Yeah.
And it was colonized by a wide range of people. And so, like, when I went to StokerCon in San Diego, I mean, I'd lived in San Francisco when I was little, which is very different than San Diego, but it was very familiar to me because it looked like my hometown, honestly, except, prettier. But I mean, I grew up on the coast in South Texas, and I was like, look, my people are everywhere, my food is everywhere, my culture is everywhere. It looked like a combination of San Antonio and Corpus Christi, and I was like, "Oh, this is familiar," and unquestionably, there's Gothic, and in a Spanish colonial sense. You don't walk around missions, haunted missions, without
Mm,
feeling that in your bones, you know? And then, This Cursed House and other author, like, when you were talking about Southern Gothic, they're bringing something different to the table because for a long time, Southern Gothic was V.C. Andrews and
mhm.
Rice,
Right.
and it was a
Right.
very specific white voice, regardless of the the population not being just that voice. It was the
Yeah.
voice that was told for a long time. And so then you start getting, um, into there's this new wave of Southern Gothic that doesn't look like B.C. Andrews and Anne Rice. It looks, it tells a lot of these antebellum stories in a completely different point of view. And not only that, it doesn't have to be like during plantation times, if you will. It can be the residual effects of all of it now. There's stories we grow up with that even if they didn't happen to you, generational trauma, generational ghosts, the things that haunt us, they might not be your experiences. They may be experiences your grandparent had, but because of systemic things and because of fears that may have been planted, like my grandmother, somebody was trying to educate me on a non-indigenous person was trying to educate me on an indigenous situation where children were being snatched. And I'm like, I know. I understand because this happened to my grandmother. And I was a teenager before I realized that that wasn't something that could just happen to me, where white people couldn't just come in and claim me and take me from my parents, theoretically. We know that's happening right now, but it was one of those things where, like, that's generational trauma I lived with and feared. I was, like, 16 maybe when I realized that that wasn't just something you could do, um, because that was my grandmother's still alive, like,
Yeah.
she's still living and these stories still haunt her because it affected our our dynamics with her sisters and her brothers and all of my cousins, like, we all had this haunting us. Our story may not be something you're gonna expect, but it's there,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that they're starting to come out now, and then when you think about that in the context of New England, well, New England has an entirely different history. Florida has a different history. And so it's just really interesting, when you go and look at Texas has a different history than the rest of the South. We are freaking weird, our history. We have a combination of, Spanish colonialism coupled with every loser in every other state coming to Texas to escape all of the law, like being arrested everywhere else
Yeah.
and landing here at the Alamo because they also decide, well, we hate slave or we want to keep our slaves, so we'll just stay here and we'll get involved with this colonialism over here. And it just creates this weird thing because then you have German immigrants that are populated all of Central Texas who hate, like, don't want anything to do with slavery. And it's just like, what's going on? And all of it haunts us, and all of it dictates like our politics today, and all of those are ghosts that linger. And how are we telling those stories and how are we talking about those things? And one of the ways that we do it is with Gothic.
And do you think that's why that spoke to you, like, why that became something that were drawn to
Listen,
reading? And
I think I've always just lacked a ghost.
okay, I love it,
I
it
just
can't
always
it doesn't
like
have
the
to be
good.
that deep, okay.
No, because from the time I was young, I was drawn to, Jenny and her green ribbon, and I was drawn to fairy tale. And when I was reading my child my copies of fairy tale books, they're dark because the 70s didn't really censor fairy tales the way that currently
Yeah.
published fairy tale books do.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Yep.
so, I was always just really interested in those dark macabre stories. I went to Catholic school and it was all about story time, like what saint's getting drawn and quartered today or whatever. Like, it was always so dark and gruesome. And you walk into church and you're looking at a crucifix with a bleeding Jesus. I mean, it's just
Right, right.
it's like I don't think there was any. You can't be brown without being dark and spooky in some way too. Like that's our aesthetic, man.
Yeah.
It's funny how you think about certain stories that, how like people have these things where they do the PowerPoints for their friends. And I recently saw a reel of somebody walking through the concept of Snow White and saying, like, she is unconscious. And your
Yeah.
thought was to walk up and kiss her. And
Yeah.
like then someone in the comments was saying, like, you'd look at the original, she wakes up because she gives birth. Like, it's actually like she had, talk about non-consent, which I didn't know that, but I'm just saying the idea of even just like the Little Mermaid and the
Oh, how
true
dark
story of
there,
that
yeah.
is and how
Mhm,
he has to change herself for the whole
mhm.
yeah,
She's
so
in, like, terrible pain the entire
it's
time
like
she's yeah.
it's like the real feminine rage, and they just like I'm like, "Okay, there's a reason why I've never enjoyed Disney movies because they're so damn uncomfortable to me." Like, I was like, "I don't find the joy." I'm like,
Yeah.
"There's a lot of
I was always
heart-wrenching parts."
intrigued though, because I'm always interested. I mean, I was such a shy, intimidated, easily bullied little kid. I kind of flowered and came into my own as a teenager and joined the debate team and learned a lot as far as speaking up for myself and everything. But when I was younger, I understood feeling helpless. I understood feeling like I was at the whim of not my mom being a witch, but like the world or other people that you knew or I understood that and I was intrigued. But I was also, I mean, look, these things look interesting too. I loved The Dark Crystal. That is Gothic fantasy. I loved, all of I mean, you look at a lot
You
of
see,
80s children's anything, and it was dark, and I loved it. And so and they didn't hold back in quite the same way. I mean, you don't watch The Neverending Story without without that darkness, you know?
Uh-huh.
It's
That's
yeah,
yeah.
it's in there. But the other thing about Gothic that I would say is really important, I'm gonna talk about this when I talk about Wuthering Heights with Neil on Talking Scared, is that it taps into your id, and so does romance. And when Gothic romance, that's one of the reasons why Gothic romance is so interesting because and there was and in the '60s, '70s, and '80s, there was this real renaissance of those things because you could be unhinged and people were devouring it because, right now we're so worried about whether or not it's okay to have a toxic hero or a toxic this or a toxic that. And it's like the thing about Gothic and the thing about romance and when you blend them together is that those are genres 100% written and read for the id. They're not worried about what other people might think of you reading those things.
Yeah.
mm,
You can work through whatever you wanna work through because those are about your id.
that's
Mm.
amazing.
So, I'm not worried about whether or not somebody's gonna judge my choice of a hero or this or that or whatever, and I think that's really interesting because sometimes it's not about that. I do love a cinnamon roll hero, though. They're so sweet. But it's not about that. It's about it. Yeah, it's exploring fear. It's exploring desire. It's exploring all kinds of things. But you can do it like you're working through it. Either as a writer or a reader when you're reading these things.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that you're on contract for or deadline, so can you share a little bit about what you're working on right now or just
My official announcement hasn't been made yet, so I can't
Okay.
do anything until I do that. So
Gotcha.
I'm writing it already because I already have a deadline, but until the deal report comes out, I don't wanna say, like, too much,
Okay,
very good.
gotcha.
That's
but it is Gothic romance, so
Oh,
okay.
but
hey.
it's nonfiction. It's
Oh,
nonfiction.
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I love myself some nonfiction. I think every month I have at least 1 to 2 nonfiction, which is a lot, I feel like, when we're trying to read the amount of guests and just
Mhm.
other things
Yeah.
that are on here, but because I try to read between, like, 15 and 20 books a month,
Yeah.
and so it can be 10 to
Lordy,
20%.
that's impressive.
And I wanna tell you why that is, because I didn't realize how dysregulated my nervous system was,
Mm.
and that is such a like, I think I had shared this on another podcast, but after I'd had my 2nd child, I I remember, like, Adam and I, during our wedding pictures, I'm just, like, sitting here, like, dab here of concealer, dab here, like, no issue. After I had my 2nd child is when I noticed, I'm like, "Wow, I'm starting to get this rosacea." I thought that it was just after childbirth, like, I didn't realize that it was stress and cortisol and all these other things that I was trapping. You know how they say, like, when you're going through hard things, like, you have to get it out. You have to put it somewhere. You have to expel it. Well, I wasn't, right? So, I mean, I had been to multiple dermatologists and I've had so many different skin peels and whatever, and it just didn't matter what I did, nothing. Now, that being said, last year was the first year that I mean, I, like, devoured books, and I would pretty much, like I said, like, on average, it was over 20 books a month, and, I don't sleep a lot, so basically after people go to bed, then I usually sit and read my book and whatever. When I tell you that I could pretty much show up without makeup now, and I used to be bright cherry red and thick and throbbing, like I could feel pulsing in my entire face. I would get on like a call with with my doctor and they'd be like, "Oh," like it was like they winced at me to be like, "It looks so painful." And it was. And I genuinely like, believe that reading allowed me to work out my emotions, how you said, like, for the id and just to put words and language to things I was feeling, and then because I really can't it's not like we didn't continue to go through trials
Mhm.
and really hard things because we have been, and, you don't share everything about that on your show of just normal life of hard things and whatnot. But, like, I had my job change after 10 years and was on and I still was like, I lost weight. And and it was just like everything I feel like just fell back into place of like and now when I was looking for a new job, I was like, I want this to to relate to that I can make more time to read.
Mhm.
Because I and now, like, I found a job that, allows me to do more reading.
Yeah.
And I still, am working it out, but
It's like one of your prescriptions. It's one
it
of your medicines that
absolutely
you
is a
take.
prescription for me, and that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, like, I don't say it because for me, it is important that I read every day as taking my Zoloft.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause it is regulating else, and I guess it's like you're free from demands and the world, and you're in this bubble, and I can't believe how much it has healed me, and I'm sure, other people that are reading find so much peace and coziness, but I was not a reader for a long time because I joke and say I just wasn't medicated enough to read. I just kept rereading the same lines. If something started fast enough, I could keep pace with it, but I feel like I'm making up for lost time. Like when you see there's so many good books out there, it's
Mhm.
like I
Yeah.
I if I could figure out how to read 2 in a day, I would because I that's that one lady on TikTok where she's like, "I read a book a day." I'm like, "I would love I'm working toward that, lady. Try to do
Going
that."
back to the idea that you were saying earlier in this episode, though, about, how I guess we were both talking about it, but it was basically with scheduling and everything and not having enough time. I mean, there are books like I didn't interview Virginia Fato, but I loved not American Gothic.
Victorian Psycho,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you, American Gothic, what Victorian Psycho, I really loved that book, but so what you wind up doing for anybody who's listening and wants to have a show or whatever, what I wind up doing is just trying to talk it up in other ways. I will still find a way to incorporate it maybe into a themed show or featuring it on my socials, uh, talking about it with interviews for anything, when I'm a guest on another show, whatever. You find ways to still share those things. You don't necessarily have to interview the author in order to make an
Share the love
impact.
of it.
Yeah, to share and to make an impact and share the love of it.
So we had talked to you a little bit beforehand about you bringing some of your favorite books. I feel like this is a good
Or some
segue or
recommendations.
rec.
I don't know, maybe your listeners aren't sick of it yet because maybe they haven't heard me talk about it, but I will never stop talking about Circe by Madeline Miller. That is my
Yeah.
favorite book.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely, and it's not gothic, but it is witchy. Um,
Mhm.
and not just witchy, she is a witch. The whole book is a woman who ultimately finds her power through her witchcraft, and she does that in a cottage, like, with all of the advantages the child of a god would have.
Yeah.
So, but in addition to the fact that Miller wrote an incredible novel, it is narrated to perfection by Perdita Weeks. So I listened to that audiobook over and over. Like I've read it on paper, but really for me, it's the audiobook and I listen to it over and over and over. It is my summer soundtrack every summer. I listen to it at least a couple of times. I just, when I'm writing and I feel like I want to have some inspiration, there are things I've written that are not like replicating Madeline Miller's words or anything like that, but are just inspired by her writing with regard to There's moments, for example, like the cadence or whatever, I'm not trying to mimic. It just inspires you and it flows out and you don't even realize it. And I'm just like, ooh, I know that I was listening to this scene of Cersei whenever I wrote this seemingly non-related thing. One, I have a novel that is out there like on sub, so it's not out in the world or anything yet. And there's a scene that involves like teeth and the smacking of a mouth and teeth coming out. And there's a scene in Cersei where there's like someone's being whipped. A god is being whipped and he's bleeding this golden blood. And the fury is going nuts and so those two things are completely unrelated, but it was just the way Madeline Miller used language to kind of cut through the gore of what's happening so that it was at once very descriptive and beautiful all at once. And
Mhm.
I wasn't trying to do that. I just know that I had been listening to that book
Yeah.
at like, on and off throughout the day when I sat down to write that scene. I guess it just flowed through me like the force.
Mm,
And I was like, I can see that in my scene, even
yeah,
though none of the words are the same. Like, not one word is the same. It's literally just, I guess, the inspiration,
yeah.
and that's what good literature does. It just, no, when something just stays with you so much to where it just gets you through everything. I don't know. It's a whole, Cersei's just this magnificent witch, Greek mythology retelling. Madeline Miller's a genius.
I love that, and it kinda reminds me, I was just reading somewhere that there's authors or people that are doing art in general that will play something
Mhm.
over and over again while whether it's a song, whether it's a certain movie,
All
soundtrack,
the
whatever
time.
it is that maybe they're doing, that almost puts them in this sort of trance-like state of, like, creation. You're not copying, you're not, even necessarily, like, what you're doing has anything to do with what it is that you're listening or doing, but
Right.
it like, great art creates more great art almost, like, in a way that's really cool.
And it just happens, like, Amelie's my favorite movie, and there's
Oh
no
I
way.
god.
love
Oh,
Amelie.
that's so good.
That's one of the first movies we ever watched together.
Yes, it
So
is.
good.
Okay, so, like, Cersei's my favorite book, like, without question, that would be my desert island book, Amelie's my desert island movie, and there's no question that anybody who listens to my show wouldn't get that. You know what I mean?
I
They would,
love that.
where they wouldn't pick up on that. Just yeah, there's this kind of blend of whimsy and lushness. And, even though Amelie's not Gothic, there's no way
Yeah,
you're gonna see that movie and not anyone who knows me would
yeah.
know,
Well,
you know?
you
With
have
that little tinge of melancholy that goes
yes.
with it too,
And
Well,
it's like
I was gonna
isolation.
say
She feels very isolated, even with her friends and family, and that's Gothic, you feel isolated. I was an only child. I live in that's my id.
yeah,
yeah. Well, you know what? That movie really feels like it's written as if it were a book, in terms of how the female main character is and how
it's very, like, in
so
the
much
psyche
that's it,
so much
because
more than yeah.
her acting and what less about, like, what she doesn't say and how freaking clever she is and just that part gets me, how expressive she is, but also shy, and she's just maybe that's why I always liked it, is it feels more intimate than any movie,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's the intimacy of a book.
Absolutely, and for anybody who's interested in Save the Cat, I know that people like Save the Cat to help for their writing.
Mhm.
There's a Save the Cat Goes to the Indies has the Save the Cat beat sheets for Amelie, just so y'all know.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, have to check that out. Definitely. Yeah, no, that's very cool, I love that. So, Circe, Amelie. What else? You kinda just said that there's some books and some things that you can't have on the show. Does anything you said Victorian Psycho, does anything else pop up that maybe you've read recently that like, "I'm not gonna have on my show, but I would love to shout out this book or this thing."
Can always have them later, like, you know what I mean? Like, I
I
can
love that too, that
yeah,
because that's the other thing that I was gonna
The
say when it
trend
comes to this
chasing.
is the recency bias that no book, like books started being written in 2020, like, to some people, it seems like. But
well,
yeah.
so, for example, they're gonna write another book,
Right.
like, there's, let's see, what was I gonna say? Joanna von Veen, for example, wrote
Mm,
a couple of books, and I think she's got another one. Yes, well, Blood on Her
yes.
Tongue is the one I read, and there was another one before that.
Mhm.
And so what I may wind up doing, for example, is having them come on for the 3rd book, but we're gonna
Yeah.
talk about all the books.
Mhm. I love
You
that,
can
yeah.
do that too. I did my end of year episode featuring books that I didn't necessarily have on the show, but that I loved,
Mm.
and one of them was The Hounding by Zenobi Purvis, and I thought loved it. I thought it was weird, like, I loved it because it was so weird and great. I
But
mean,
it's
it's hit
also
or miss for people, but it's
well,
like
I think
Virgin Suicides meets
yeah,
The Crucible, and
yeah.
that's my jam.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, it was very it's an asshole man that basically starts a bunch of, like, rumors that these women are turning into dogs and is persecuting them, and, I mean, that's really kind of the theme of it and what this man is allowed to get away with and the power that
Ugh.
his words hold, and it is definitely I thought it was very female rage.
Oh, yeah.
It's very Shirley Jackson with the question of mania as well, and suspicion, and all of those things. So that's always fascinating to me. I love We Have Always Lived in the Castle. That's another one of my favorites. And so, I know everyone talks about the House on Haunted Hill, and it's a genius book, but that We Have Always Lived in the Castle goes back to my sense of isolation that I mean, again, I'm an only child. I was always in my head. So We Have Always Lived in the Castle just speaks more to me. So it I felt like there was a lot of that going on in The Hounding as well, because it's also, people that also read The Lottery, like if you read that and you haven't
Mhm,
read The Hounding, there's like
Mhm.
that kind of thing happening, and that also
mhm.
happens in We Have Always Lived in the Castle, just the suspicion and the mania that surrounds the
Right,
suspicion.
right. How about
I will always shout out Rachel Harrison. She's one of my good friends, but she's also, and I'm not saying this because that's not a weird ticket, but what I'm trying to say is I love her books and I know that people know we're friends, but I'm not shouting her out just because we're friends. Like I genuinely love her work.
Yeah.
She
No, we're
she
saying
really is an incredible writer
she is
who
so incredible.
yes, yes, she does so much for the community behind the scenes that a lot of people have no idea about. She's this really incredible person, but she's also an incredible writer. And I love that you can pick up The Return or you can pick up Play Nice and completely different stories. Even though every author has their core story, you will see Rachel's voice in everything she writes. But I love that there's so much nuance that a lot of people, and when I say people, I mean like man shows, not all men, but man shows. It's always a
Mhm.
man show that will not get it. And
Mhm.
there will be nuance. Like she loves to read poetry. There's some really incredible short story writers she loves. Like she cares about craft so much that she is constantly studying like the best, like poetry, the best, like all the, and she puts like I was talking about when I'm listening to Cersei and how that influences me, you can see that in her work as well. And so I'll sometimes like highlight something and it might be 2 or 3 words, but those 2 or 3 words are doing so much work and I'll text her and I'm like, "I know what you're doing here." And she's like, "I wondered if anybody would pick up on that," because that's how much she pours into her writing.
Yeah.
So, and
When we
I will
talked to her, she shouted you out and said, she had talked, when Such Sharp Teeth came out, she's talking to a lot of people about things, but she felt like you were the first one that got it, of what that book was about. And, when I was talking about Play Nice, like for my own Instagram and stuff, I just was like, I don't think I want people to recognize and appreciate what this woman has done every single year since The Return came out. She has written a book that is singularly great, and, like, she has not missed,
no,
and, like, I don't know if anyone, Stephen King included, has had a six-book run as good as her first 6 books have been.
spectacular.
It's
And
incredible.
I just really want people to understand that there's so much craft,
Mhm.
I mean, yes, they have these wonderful, like, kind of pop covers. I love her covers, but, they have these wonderful vibrant colors. She's very good at, marketing with, like, the cute outfits that match the main
Yeah, when she's
characters
like,
of the books.
"I'm in
All
my
of
play
this,
nice space, like, I'm
Mhm,
they're
wearing
yeah.
all
not
the nice." Yeah.
yeah, like, that's the fun part, right? But when she's writing she is 100% serious, and
Mhm.
I really want to make sure that people know that, like, I don't know, I think there's just, and I say that because there's men who have comments that leave a lot to be desired when it comes to all of our stories, but when it
Yeah.
comes, you know, to Rachel, that's just something I wanted to put out there.
Well,
She's definitely one of my favorites.
we
Mhm.
were lucky enough to win her book that was annotated
So
for
thirsty, yeah,
So Thirsty,
that she personally annotated, yeah.
and
Very
Adam was
nice.
like, I hadn't read that one yet, and he was like, "You're not gonna read the annotated," and I was like, "Well, why wouldn't I? That's the whole point of." So when you're talking about this and seeing, "I wrote this, my editor didn't think this would work, but I said people would get it. I was really proud of this line. I was doing this at this time." I feel like when you're saying this, like, I deeply believe you because, I mean, the fact that she went through the entire book, I mean, every page had things on it. It was like being inside of her writing process
Process,
and
yeah,
mind was so fabulous, but you can absolutely see, like,
the work,
oh my
yeah.
gosh, yes.
I'm gonna Let me
And
grab
then my
something to show you real quick.
okay,
Cool.
So, this is the copy of Play Nice. So, I don't know if you can see,
Oh, yeah.
like,
a lot of
here's
tabs.
a
Yes,
lot of tabs, and then there's more tabs.
there you go.
You know, there's this is my copy of Play Nice, and you could just see, like, how tabbed it is, and these tabs have a bunch of notes on them, like, I don't know if you can see, on both sides,
Yes.
but
For the listener, there's probably 20 tabs on the vertical and the
Yeah,
horizontal
or
piece,
part of
no,
yeah.
the
that's underestimating because there's a lot right here
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
there's
okay, yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
and yeah,
triple
um,
in.
and the point of all of that is just to talk about, like, again, just it could be one sentence, but that sentence is doing a lot of work, for example, so and I know all kinds of writers, you know, care about their work and everything, but you asked about favorites, and so there you go.
Yeah. Well, she's a favorite in this house too, for
She
sure.
is. My
So
neighbor we ended up getting our neighbor to she wanted to read one of the books because I was saying how good it was, and she went through Rachel's entire backlist and went through every single book, and she's like, "She's my new favorite author." I think
yeah.
once you start her, you can't help
Mm,
yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
so that's awesome. So we have an announcement to look forward to coming from
Hopefully
you, which I'm
soon.
excited for. Yes, we have new episodes coming out. I need to catch up because I really Simone St. James is one of my favorite authors. I
Yes,
love
she
The
is.
You
Sundown
loved her.
Hotel, so I need to read the new one and listen to your episode after I finish reading it. So I was very excited to see that you talked to her.
Yeah, she just did my Patreon book club last night as at the time of this recording. And I was just, my Patreon members are the ones that ask all the questions during book club. Like the authors come in and the Patreon members ask all the questions. And I'm just so proud of my little community because they just have the most wonderful, smart, engaging questions. And I mean, Simone St. James is not going on tour, so it was a really big deal for us to be able to have her because, things are not safe in the United States right now, so a lot
Mhm.
of authors are not touring,
Yeah.
especially Canadian authors are not gonna come in here and tour, and so, shout out to my Patreon book club because they made the whole night so special, I really needed that.
Right?
Simone was just so great, like, that was the thing that they were responding to. Everybody who's listening, Simone St. James is an auto buy for me. You wanna talk about
Absolutely.
favorites.
Right.
She's an auto buy for sure, and she just engaged everybody. She's just a delight, and there's a lot of little nuggets in her new book. If you like Sundown Motel,
Ah,
you're gonna
yeah. I
enjoy,
love
like
murder. I love all of her books, but yeah, I think Sundown Hotel was the first one that I read and, like, just has a
the new
very
one, yeah, the new one has all these little you'll recognize some of the ghosts and some of
mhm.
the characters and, even if they're just ancillary characters in this book, they still appear, and then there's apparently some that are, like, descendants of characters from previous books that she's written.
What?
We got all excited about that, and it's not mentioned in the book, but if you pick up on things like there's a British character who's the descendants of the couple from Maddie Clare, like,
Oh my
that's the
goodness.
grandchild of
How
the
cool.
couple from Maddie Clare, yeah, so, very
Very
That's
exciting.
so
cool.
fun.
I love it.
Well, I was remiss to mention this at the beginning of our episode, but this is the second double A
Oh,
episode. So we've got Adam
Yes.
Allen, and then we've got Agatha Andrews, and we had
Andrew
Andrew
Adams.
Adams.
Yeah.
So and we have, like, I think 3 or 4 Rebeccas coming on to
Yeah.
this. So we're gonna by the end of the year, we're gonna have to tally up to see how many double A's to
That's so
Rebeccas. I don't
funny.
know. It's
I mean, we're just the best, right? So, well, this was such a pleasure, everyone. Follow She Wore Black everywhere. I think, Instagram, Threads. Where are you anywhere else social?
Mostly Instagram and Threads. Technically, I'm on Facebook, but I'm not really, and same with Blue Sky. Like, I just sort of
Yeah.
obligatorily throw stuff up there, although
Mhm.
with the book deal, I may start being more interactive on those things, it
Right.
just depends. I'm on Substack as Agatha Andrews, and I haven't
Awesome.
posted anything there, but once the book deal is announced, I'll have more regular. That's where I'm gonna put my
So
newsletter.
excited for you. Well,
Yes.
Thank
I can
you.
see why you have the loyal audience and
Oh, yeah.
listenership that you do. You
Thank
you
you.
clearly, like, as you're talking about your love of books, I'm like, I'm just feeling like you have this fabric of, like,
Mhm.
books woven into your exterior.
I
It's
love
like
it.
it's just part of who you are, and you're
Thank
so
you.
remembering everything, and, I know that every guest that comes on is just having the best experience with you. So thank you for coming to
Thank
our
you.
show and letting us just uplift another awesome voice in this community.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I appreciate y'all having me. Thank you.
Yeah, have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
You.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.